Hello. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, so we are going to get started. Thank you very much for coming to this session. So this is the Q&A with the chairs of the Research Diversity Advisory Panel and the People and Diversity Advisory Panel. It will be in 2 parts. So in the first part, we'll have some comments and reflections from the panel, and then there will be a Q&A, both in the room and online, because this session is being live streamed as well. So welcome to everyone online as well. So my name is Pilar Pousada Solino. I'm a REF manager at the University of Cambridge, but I'm also a main panel advisor for REF 29. Just a little bit of housekeeping for the room. Please remember to switch off your phone. And there is no fire drills planned, so if the alarm goes, we'll all have to find an exit and calmly walk towards the exit. Things to say, the session will be also recorded, so for those who are not able to see today, they'll have the resource there. Just for everyone, both in the room and online, there's loads of us, and sometimes we get a bit excited about REF. Let's keep it professional and nice. But we hope you'll get a lot of time to get your questions to the panel. We think this is an excellent opportunity, especially to listen to the chairs, so both the People Advisory Panel and the Research Diversity Panel. So we would really want to prioritize your questions for both Alice and Simon. So with any more further ado, I'll just introduce the panel. So we first have Alice Oancea. She is the chair of the Research Diversity Advisory Panel. We have Rebecca Emmett next to her, who is from Research England. And then Simon Macklin, who is the chair of the People Advisory Panel. And Sylvie, in the end, is helping us with the Q&A at the end. So I think that's all you need to hear from me. So I'll pass the letter to Rebecca.
Bless you. Thank you so much for that. And thank you very much for being here today. I know you've got a lot of different choices of panels, so we're very pleased to see you here to hear from our fantastic advisory panel chairs and their work and their role in the REF. Today is also part of our ongoing engagement with the sector, and it's intended to ensure that REF isn't a black box, that people can see how we are getting to where we're going, and that's something that's been really at the forefront of everything we've been doing in the development of the guidance to date. And thank you to all of you who have contributed to our various deep dives and our various engagements over the past couple of years. We've really, really valued the insights and expertise that the sector has very generously shared with us as we've been developing the guidance overall. And we're really delighted to be here at the ARMA conference to actually get to talk to those of you who will be working most closely with the guidance itself. And it's really also really valuable for us to be able to broadcast this more widely to the rest of the sector so that there's equitable access, and we really appreciate that too. I'm going to give you a very brief overview on what the REF is, just in case you didn't know, but also, more importantly, where we are in the REF process and what we've got coming up over the next few months, before I hand over to Alice and Simon, who are going to be updating you on the work that the advisory panels has been doing, and this is a really important aspect of REF 2029. We're then, as Pilar mentioned, opening up to the Q&A both in the room and online. I'm really looking forward to talking through your questions and queries then. Now, will the clicker work? Yes, it will. Wonderful. So, for those of you who aren't 100% sure what the REF is, it was on the door. But I know everybody here knows what the REF is, but just as way of broad introduction, it's a reminder of the sheer scale of the REF. So the REF is owned and led by the 4 UK higher education funding bodies. It informs that allocation of around £2 billion a year in block grant funding. It also provides accountability for the use of public funds, and that investment in research activity. It is also constantly evolving because it is working to assess the excellence in a sector that is also constantly evolving. And we also are very aware that given its connection to the allocation of funding, it inevitably drives behaviours within the sector, and so is also a significant policy instrument and plays a policy role. But what's probably more exciting to me at this stage is looking at those numbers up on the screen. So we are expecting that REF 2029 will, in terms of scale, look quite similar to REF 2021, with over 150 universities taking part, submitting over 1,800 different submissions across the 34 units of assessment. So we'll see sort of nearly 200,000 research outputs, around 7,000 impact case studies. We'll have our library with the physical outputs, but we'll also have over 1,200 panel members. So that's experts from within the sector who come to do this work with us, who will be undertaking the criteria phase work and on the assessment phase work over roughly 800 panel meetings. So there's a huge amount going on, and it's an ongoing pursuit. So what I want to do, before I talk about the timeline and where we are in it at the moment, I just wanted to show you our triangle, our balancing priorities. Because when it comes to building up the guidance detail and the policy detail, we are constantly trying to balance a number of competing priorities, and we have them in this handy slide. The first is the impact on the robustness of the exercise. So we're constantly, when we're looking at refining the guidance, thinking about how that is going to impact the outcomes at the end of it, and whether we are getting robust outcomes for the sector and for the funding bodies. We also are balancing that against the burden that those policies and that guidance has on the sector. So given the sensitivity of the sector to REF policy, we have to really think very carefully about the implications for the sector on the things that we design and make sure that the burden associated is proportionate. We're also very concerned with the impact that we have on culture. So we know that REF guidance creates incentives, encourages certain types of behaviours, intentionally or otherwise, and we are alive to that, and we want to be considering that as we move forward and balancing each of these against each other. And I think that's the big challenge that we have, is balancing these three competing priorities, and quite often to make gains in one area, you're going to lose a bit in another. So we're constantly sort of negotiating those three and trying to move forward in the most positive way possible. And our challenge that we pose to our panels is to try and create one REF. So that is a set of guidance and policies that is the same for everybody. However, we know that disciplinary differences mean that sometimes there needs to be panel variation. We also know that that increases burden when it comes to taking part in the exercise. So throughout the process, we are looking to provide that flexibility to reflect the realities of the sector, but also balance that with the added complexity that variation can cause. And so right now we're in our criteria phase, and we're working collaboratively with the main and sub-panels and our advisory panels to develop our guidance, balancing these priorities and trying to reflect the needs, the very diverse needs of the varied institutions that make up the sector. There we go, lovely. So this is where we are in our lovely purple map. So where we are is roughly where that gold star is on the wall. So this is the broad timeline of what's going to be happening for us over the next couple of years. So as you know, we had intentions to publish the guidance a little bit earlier, but we had a little bit of a hiccup last year, a little false start, with the pause, where we took the time to rework the planned guidance to make sure it better aligned with the ambitions for the exercise and the operating context for the sector. And so that has resulted in a slightly truncated timeline. So we are still looking to finish our criteria phase in the autumn of 2026, getting the guidance out to the sector ahead of then moving forward into our submissions and then assessments phase, where we have our survey of submission intentions and additional panel recruitment, and then we move into our assessment phase. The headline thing that has resulted as a sort of as a consequence of this shortened time frame, is that we have had to, unfortunately, drop the planned consultation phase so that we can still get the guidance to the sector as early as possible. So we are very alive to the fact that the sector needs the guidance really as quickly as possible. And so that is unfortunately what has fallen by the wayside. But to counter this and to ameliorate this, we're engaging extensively to ensure that we're getting all the input we need as we finalise the guidance so that we have a smooth start for the submission phase. And this is as we're working through the criteria phase, talking to communities like yourselves, working with our panels, working with our advisory panels to make sure all of that expertise is fed in. So that's the very broad brush stroke of where we are, and this is my last slide, I promise. This is kind of what we're doing right this minute, so what we're doing to get ourselves to publication in the autumn of 2026. So you've had the high-level timeline, this is the detail, if you like. This is what we are up to at the moment. Again, lovely gold star is roughly where we are. We finished our most recent round of panel meetings on Friday, and we are currently working to further refine the guidance with a view to our calibration with the exec chairs of those panels so that we can create the next iteration of the guidance that can then be produced as papers that can go to the sub-panels in July, that these can be further refined with disciplinary input and expertise so that they can go back to the main panels for a further round of calibration and discussion so that we can iterate over the summer, and that's the further iteration box on the bottom row, before the guidance goes to steering group for review ahead of publication in the autumn. And throughout this process, we're taking on guidance from our advisory panels, from our sub and our main panels to make sure that we are considering all the guidance in the round. So as you can see, it's quite a busy next couple of months for us as we work on those iterations of the guidance. But it is an immensely valuable process, and the expertise that we're being able to draw upon is really valued and appreciated, but also makes conversations like today really, really important. So later in the Q&A, it'll be a really valuable opportunity for us to hear your thoughts and reflections, and I know that there's a poll and a question that we're going to put up, so any comments, etc., that we get from you there will be really useful to us as we are working through this process. And if there is a slight chance that you haven't signed up for our ref updates, you can now using this helpful QR code. And you can have ref updates straight to your inbox. So if you've managed to miss it, it's there for you now. You might get enough from ref already, so don't feel the need to sign up for a second time if you already are. But we're also always pleased to receive comments and questions via info@ref. So please do, if there's anything particularly around the clarity or any ambiguities that you may see in any published documentation, it's really useful for us as we are going through this iteration at the moment to hear that feedback so that we can consider it and action it as we go. So please do use our info@ref email if there's anything that you don't get a chance to tell us today and that you want us to be aware of. And then you can see us, we're all on the socials as well, so you can give us your feedback through whatever means you find preferable. That is it from me, and I feel very, very glad to be able to hand over to Alice. I will leave you the clicker. Do you want the laptop? Okay, splendid. Right. There you go.
This is the green one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you very much, ARMA, for the opportunity to share this, and to everyone in the room for turning up in such large numbers. I'm Alice. I'm the chair of the Research Diversity Advisory Panel for this ref. Hopefully I've managed to... There we go. And before I start, I want to acknowledge the dedicated and very active work of all of the members of ARDAP, the names of whom are now on your screens, and I think one of whom is already in the room at the moment, and there may be others as well. With a great thank you from me to every single one of them. So what does ARDAP do? Our terms of reference are very clear. We are to advise the REF steering group on any aspect of research diversity across the entirety of the exercise, from the kind of early days of policy development all the way to the assessment phase. And that includes the training of the panels, the recruitment of the panels, the development of the assessment criteria and the working methods, the criteria setting phase that we're currently in, the calibrations heading into the assessment process, as well as an additional responsibility for monitoring how research diversity fares in the REF and producing a final report at the end of the exercise. And, you know, RDAP, PDAP, there are new acronyms in this REF, so I figured it would be a useful thing to do right at the start to kind of show the differentiation between them. And I'm going to do that by going back to the original initial decisions for the REF, which had a very clear principle that the REF, this REF in particular, emphasizes an inclusive, diverse and collaborative research system which supports a wide range of all of those things: ideas, methodologies, outputs, impact practices, institution skills, people, roles and careers. And in terms of the two advisory panels, their kind of remits align more or less with this definition, with RDAP covering what's now in blue on the screen, so issues around the range of ideas and methodologies and approaches, outputs, practices, engagement, and PDAP concentrated more on skills, people, roles and careers, and I think institutions and their diversity kind of fall somewhere in between, in that space between the two panels. And research diversity is nothing new. And all of those initiatives that you're familiar with that focused on improving research assessment and on responsible research assessment and on reviewing the frameworks that we've had in this country, all of them recommended a fuller recognition, more inclusive recognition of diversity across all of the different forms of research and ways of communicating research. So we're building on all of that, and we're working now with this definition that the RDAP have been very busy producing and consulting on. And the definition states that for the purposes of the REF, ensuring research diversity refers to enabling and recognizing excellence on a fair and equal basis in the widest possible range of practices, outputs, engagements, and impacts. And in addition to that, it also includes recognition of strategies, cultures, and environments that support and enable epistemically diverse and equitable creation, validation, sharing, and use of knowledge. So I'll unpack the terminology in this definition in a moment, but I just wanted to share it with you in the round to begin with. So the key three aspects in that definition and in the remit of RDAP align with the three components of the REF. Those of you who are more than familiar with that will have already spotted. It's about diverse outputs and output formats, which themselves arise from a diversity of research practices. It's about diverse impact types and formats, which are generated through diverse engagement practices and sometimes through other means of harnessing the value of knowledge. And it's also about environments that enable and recognize research diversity. So after about 2 years of RDAP working on those things with the REF team and engaging with the sector, well, there we go, suspense. There we go. I'm really pleased to say that the REF guidance has research diversity all the way through. And I'm just going to show you two very busy screens, for which I partly apologize in terms of the accessibility of the text, but also I'm delighted to be able to share busy screens with you, because it means that research diversity really is there, and it's not just a general commitment of value and principle. It's actually something that is being operationalized all the way through to the REF. So in the overview guidance, some of you will have already spotted the fact that promoting diversity of research is one of the key principles, and that refers very specifically to different types of output, to different impacts, but also to interdisciplinary research, which is also within the remit of RDAP. and to the equitable recognition of all of the above in the assessment. In the COP, those of you who have been working on the codes of practice, you'll be familiar with the sections that ask for information around how diverse output types are enabled and supported in appropriate ways, about responsible research assessment practices and responsible research practices in the institution, and procedures for ensuring that submissions of outputs are representative of the research in a particular unit. So all of those things are already baked into the exercise, and the same applies through the published guidance on the three elements of the REF, where you'll see that diverse contributions of knowledge and outputs and research practices are very much part of the CKU submission. The diversity of both underpinning research and impact and engagement are part of the engagement and impact section. In SPRI, there's emphasis on research environments that enable diverse and excellent research activity and recognize it all the way across. There's also mention of calibration exercises that RDAP is going to be involved in the coming period, and also to advise that RDAP is offering to inform the panel's assessment. As some of you might know already, RDAP has representatives on each of the main panels, the remit of which is to be mindful of the importance of upholding research diversity throughout the exercise. So what does that mean, though, for the panels? It means that there's a clear expectation, so basically that the panels build a shared and strong understanding of what research diversity means in the respective units of assessment and across the main panel. That they build an appreciation of the value and contribution of diverse research, that they develop the commitment to uphold those principles and support research diversity by applying an inclusive definition of excellence throughout the exercise, and obviously that they translate all of that into fair and equitable research assessment practices. So I'll spend another few minutes, if that's okay, just looking at the three components in a little more detail. So starting with the outputs, what does it mean that we have diversity of outputs? You'll have noticed that I didn't use the term non-traditional outputs, because in RDAP we've advised that the diversity of outputs encompasses an entire spectrum, which may range from journal peer review articles all the way to artifacts and to performance and so on. And each of these may be more or less historically prevalent in specific units of assessment. Therefore, the definition of traditional and the definition of something by contrast with that, it can be very, very complicated to apply. So that's how we see outputs as a whole diverse spectrum, which may be expressed in the most appropriate way to the research that's being submitted and its audiences. And its assessment will be mindful of all of the purposes, designs, methodologies, approaches, and modes of communication for that research, some of which may depart from historical conventions in a field, and in particular in relation to past submissions within a field. Of course, all of the outputs still need to meet the definition of research for the purposes of the REF, and that's one of the reasons why that definition has been kept so broad and inclusive. In the previous REF, we had an annex, which was called Annex K, that had a list of different types of outputs and for illustration purposes. And we had messages from the sector that you found that very helpful. So that's been updated, and there will be another iteration of that, not a great departure from that, but with the appropriate updates that will be out with the guidance when that is released in the autumn. How about diversity of practices? I said earlier that all of this diversity of outputs comes from a vast range of practices that are also to be fairly recognized in the exercise. And these may include things like research synthesis and replication and practice research and co-creation and participatory approaches and so on, across a range of perspectives and participants and forms of evidence funding bodies and so on. It is very important that across the exercise, research arising from these practices and translated then into particular kinds of outputs or different kinds of outputs is given fair and equal recognition as well. So we are emphasizing as ARDAP the importance of this variety of practices in thinking about research. That may apply also in relation to the impact side of things when we talk about the underpinning research, again being of multiple types. And interdisciplinary research continues to be important in this REF and recognized on a par with any other form of research. We at ARDAP are contributing to the criteria phase work on IDR and additional guidance on that will also be released in the autumn. Also we are contributing to the calibration that's going to be happening around how IDR is assessed. You know already that there are IDR experts on the main panels as well, and that this is taken very seriously. But I think we can all safely say that there's no IDR flag anymore, so the mechanisms will be in more depth than simply marking that on the system. And then on engagement and impact, there's a breadth of ways in which research can reach, and we want that the REF recognizes equally and fairly all of those, with all of the different types of meaningful interaction that lead to the generation of these impacts. So that's the definition of engagement that's being used in this REF as well. I personally very much hope that the sector will feel confident to continue to submit and to expand those submissions to make sure that the full range of different types of impacts is sent to the panels for consideration. There was an annex on impacts as well in the previous REF, which highlighted different types of impact and different forms of evidence that may be used to support them, and that annex is also being reviewed and updated for release together with the guidance. So there's some clarity, additional clarity that might arise from that. And then finally on strategy and environment, there are principles across the REF that suggest that it is very important to recognize the strategies and actions aimed at embedding research diversity and responsible practices, the research environments that enable that, the procedures, and the positive cultures that encourage research diversity. So I think I'm going to stop there, but just leave you with this final thought, which is that research diversity is not a distraction from excellence, but it is indeed its engine. And I'm very happy to talk at length about that with anybody who would like to interact, and also to hear more from you about how researching diversity matters across the sector. So I'm going to pass now over to Simon to talk about the work of PDAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. So I'll do a similar exercise to where we got to with Alice. This is really looking predominantly at the people and diversity advisory panel. I don't think there's anyone here from that today, but similarly with Alice, you know, it's really important that the panel is really a group, and there are a lot of people working throughout the work of PDAP and throughout the work that is happening across REF on many, many different aspects of people and diversity. And they come from a wide range of institutions, a wide range of disciplines, as well as a wide range of roles within the sector. So we have representatives who come from research management, who come from technical disciplines, who come from HR, as well as across a number of disciplines. And it's really important that we can draw on their expertise across all of those elements to ensure that we complete what we are intended to do. So in terms of the same aspect as what Alice was talking about, the purpose of the People and Diversity Advisory Panel is new to REF 29. We were tasked with taking the work of what was the Equality EDAP, the Equality and Diversity Advisory Panel, and their report at the end of Ref 21, and expanding that within the aspects that Alice talked about around a wider range of skills and people and roles, particularly. So, as with Alice, PDAP is there to advise the REF steering group across the whole range of the exercise, from the criteria right through to the end of the assessment phase, and produce again a report at the end that continues to take the important work forward. And as it says there, the expansion of its remit really looks not only at the sort of more demographic elements that were really, really important, and advancing equality, diversity, inclusion throughout Ref 29, which was the role of EDAP, but it also has an expanded remit, particularly around the diversity of roles, careers, and career stages, and that is recognised in everything that we do and in all the policy that is produced. So it is really important that we continue to work on making sure that the diversity of roles, careers, and career stages that support research excellence in the UK are able we're able to increase and support more recognition of that right throughout the exercise. And as it says at the bottom, and as Alice alluded to, the matters of the diversity of people and the diversity of research are inextricably interlinked. So RDAP and PDAP do and will continue to work closely together to the benefit of both sets of diversity within the exercise. So our terms of reference, as we were looking at, is really split into those two elements: the diversity of roles and careers and career stages within the UK research system, and particularly it's a really important moment for all of recognising all of these. There is a huge amount of shift and flux within the size of teams, within the size of roles, within a range of careers that, and including new careers that are emerging within the UK research system. Even over the last couple of years, we have had some really interesting conversations with new careers that are being developed around research within the UK, as well as making sure that the exercise and providing advice to make sure it provides due regard to advancing equality of opportunity, particularly around the protected characteristics. Now, as many of you will know, protected characteristics are different in some of the countries of the UK than others, so this is a very holistic look at protected characteristics. A little bit more there on its responsibilities, but it is really an advisory body, and it takes itself right the way through, including looking at ways of developing panels, the training around panels and their ways of working. And we're doing quite a lot of work, obviously, at the moment around the submitted codes of practice and advising on those. We're not formally part of the assessment process, need to probably make that clear. We are an advisory body as part of that and really working on the calibration of those. So in terms of the phases, we have been involved right from the beginning in terms of working on the criteria setting and looking forward to the assessment phase. We've worked on main panels and looking at the development of SPRI and all of the working groups around that, including SPRI, the inclusion of AI, interdisciplinary engagement, and the responsible engagement and impact, as has RDAP right throughout the process. And we have a role to play in the development and seeing through of the codes of practice. So what we get asked most about, obviously, is SPRE, although that is not our only remit. So we're not interchangeable with that, but it's a reminder of where we have landed post-pause, that the two criteria, vitality and sustainability, will remain, that there will be two statements, an institutional level statement and a unit level statement, and that qualitative and quantitative data will be encouraged throughout to strengthen the narrative, and these will be about distance travelled. There will be no third criteria, and we will continue to advise throughout SPRE on the development of people and research diversity. Importantly for us, there is a real need to make sure that SPRE acknowledges and provides opportunities for that recognition of roles, careers, and career stages. And there are various elements, no doubt, that will come up in the questions and answers following on from this that really look at how we're looking to develop into those areas that will finalise towards the guidance. We're also really mindful that cultures of research, research environments do differ between main panels, between disciplines, and between all sorts of types of aspects that overlap with the work of RDAP, those that are really supportive of research diversity, but equally those that are really supportive of a range of careers and roles and career stages within research environments. And we are seeing, obviously, at the moment in particular disciplines, big impacts across the sector of changes to ECR percentages, to a whole range of different things that affect research environments across the board. So we are really interested that institutions get the opportunity to show how through this they maintain vital and sustainable research strategies, peoples, and research environments throughout that context. And there is an immense amount of work that's going on with what were the people, culture, and environment representatives on all of the main panels to make sure that that disciplinary and that diversity of opinion and that diversity of opportunity across different institution types is really valuably captured as part of this process, to go back to what Rebecca was saying at the moment, to fulfill that purpose of REF about understanding more about the health of the research across the UK. So SPRE has been renamed. It's really about celebrating, as we go back to those principles about finding excellence wherever we can. There is a real intention through all the discussions that have been had so far to make sure that we can really celebrate how clear research strategies enable the building of excellent cultures and research environments. And it's really important that institutions and UOAs get the opportunity to talk and develop how they value all the people who undertake, enable, and support research engagement and impact across the excellent research that is there within the UK. There is a myriad of people who do this, and more it's really important that we give the opportunity for people to show how they undertake, yes, but also enable and support research across the UK. It is also about understanding and encouraging explanations and assurances and explorations of excellence in sustainable and ethical research practices, and opportunities to highlight strong and inclusive environments that enable people across all careers and roles and career stages to conduct world-class research. And I think it's incredibly important that that strong, diverse, dynamic research ecosystem across all 4 countries is able to be supported through the exercise. We obviously understand, as Rebecca said at the beginning, that REF has a role to play, and it does shape research practices, but it is also there to make sure that we can reward excellence wherever it may be found throughout the nations of the UK's research system. We've built a lot in the IL and UL on the PCE pilot and seeing the successes of that, and we will continue to report continually on how we can better support and make the guidance really clear for people as we move from research environment to SPRE. So I think that's my slot, if I remember rightly. And we're moving over, I think, are we? Oh, sorry. Oh, to the Q&A section. Lovely.
Hello? That works better. Thank you very much to the panelists. And just before we open the Q&A, you have some questions in the slides to give you an idea maybe of the kind of things we would like to hear from you if you have questions about these particular areas. So we are going to do the Q&A both in the room and online. So it might take a little to get going. But I think, shall we start with the room? So we do have some mics, and our volunteers, thank you very much, will go to you with the mic. So there is one question at the back.
University London. It's about the consultation. I'm a ref manager and I'm getting a lot of questions about the timeline, and I understand why you've had to move the consultative session out of it. However, I wonder if there's space for consultation on just the scope of the UOAs, because that's the thing that can't come up until people can see it. So previously, we've had the consultation on the methods, but also when the panel guidance has come out, there's been an opportunity for us to write to our researchers and say, is everything you expected in this scope, and to feedback. So I'm wondering if there's an option for just that small part of the ref to be consulted on, and for us to say, you know, we've got research in this area, we think it fits with this panel, and we wonder if it could be clarified in the guidance.
Thanks. Is this mic on? Can you hear me? I think it's a really useful prompt. Thank you. I will take it away. I don't think anything is going to be unexpected in those UOA descriptors that you're talking about there. But it's a really useful prompt, and I will take it away with me and talk to the team, because I appreciate that there's always going to be ambiguities, and where we might need to offer some additional clarity. It's a really good prompt to have. So thank you.
Okay. Please. And if you can say your name and your institution, that'd be great.
Hi, that's loud, sorry. Hi, I'm Becky, I'm from Lancaster University. I'm just interested in the diversity of research output types. So when I've been having discussions with my colleagues in STEM, and I said, right, so in this ref, we need to look at, make sure we're not just submitting your kind of traditional outputs, not just make sure you think about everything. And I said, if you're in engineering, you're making a widget. And they said, oh, well, if I've made a widget, I've got a paper. And if I've got a data set, I've got a paper. And so I just wondered how the RDAP was thinking about how we need to represent that, because I think the argument from STEM would be, well, we can submit all papers, that is representative of all the research types that we produce, but I wasn't quite sure how that fitted with the guidance, so whether you've been discussing that or not. Thank you.
So this ref is not mandating diversity. The purpose of this whole involvement of RDAP and all of this work is to enable recognition of this diversity in ways that are appropriate for every field, and the types of outputs that are consistent with ways of working across every discipline. Having said that, if there is a set of practices in the fields that you're talking about, which then translate into types of outputs that are different from, say, conference papers and journal articles, or indeed patents, then the exercise and the work of RDAP aims to enable fair recognition and fair assessment of those. And to that goal, we will be running those calibration exercises and producing training for all of the panels and the sub-panels, and also having this kind of constant stream of advice and just attentiveness as part of the main panels as well.
Okay, thank you. We are going to go to one of the questions in the online session. So one of our colleagues would like to hear more, both from PDAP and RDAP, about how you may or may not be advising panels and sub-panels on how to take into account the challenges that sector is experiencing in this REF sector, in this REF period, so both financial, but also the impact on research environments.
I've just answered one, but I'm very happy to jump in.
You start with that, and then I'll...
Okay. We are all very keenly aware of all of the challenges across the sector. And actually, I'm very grateful to everyone I spoke to for the past, almost 24 hours here at the conference, who very transparently shared with me stories about the really complex environment that they are managing and all of the challenges that they're dealing with. And in the previous plenary session, we saw all of that on the screen. We're trying to do more with less in a very uncertain set of circumstances. I think that research diversity and really recognizing it properly through the research, through the actual assessment processes, is a way of responding positively to that. So rather than us as a sector kind of trying to align with particular ways of doing things that may or may not have been successful in the past, the idea is now that we recognize quality and we recognize excellence in whichever shape and form it takes within the circumstances in which organizations are working. So that's one, I think, positive aspect of this from the perspective of RDAP. Another aspect of this, however, is, I think, Rebecca, you mentioned burden earlier on. To enable that assessment, we kind of need to strike a balance. If you remember the triangle of priorities, we need to strike a balance there. We can't introduce such complicated processes and mechanisms that then the burden is so heavy and every single one of the people in this room and across the universities would put vast amounts of time into trying to do everything different from before. So we're trying to kind of find that line and advise the panels so that they are very much sensitized to diversity and they understand and appreciate quality in all of its forms, but without expecting you to put vast amounts of additional work into that. And I'm hopeful that the guidance that will be released in the autumn will navigate that line really well.
Yes, I would add, just in terms of the specifics of the question, which is the sort of how are we working between Alice and I and the main panels and the sub-panels, is that I think across the board, it isn't just the advisory panels who are made up from people of the sector. You know, all of the panels come from a variety of institutions across the sector. And so we are all keenly aware of the different pressures in different types of institutions, and partly one of the roles that RDAP and PDAP can play is trying to as Alice has put, sort of keep it mindful without going into that burden territory. Alice and I meet with the REF team and the main panel chairs relatively frequently, and I can certainly say that the conversation about how the sector is, where pressures are, comes up routinely as part of that conversation about how we can tread that line between moving forward with the principles that were laid out and all the great work that was done through the FRAP process, but also capture a little bit more of that burden within it. So as Alice said, it's a very fine line, but I think at the moment the roles that the advisory panels can play is to keep that mindful of, is this what we want to do? Equally, are there things that we can remove that actually make diversity more apparent, more able, more enabled through the process, that don't actually add burden, but also just remove burden in certain cases as well. And I think there are opportunities for that have been taken throughout the REF process, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you. Just a reminder for those online to join the Q&A session. Please join Slido and use the access code REF 2029. So hopefully you can join us there. I'll pass on another question from the online session. So another colleague would like to know, what are panels considering that might be possible in terms of improved output diversity? So for example, if a sub-panel received 99% of journal articles in REF 21, what would a sub-panel see as a positive in REF 29?
who would like to have?
Interesting question. Yeah. What I hope will happen is that prior to that panel even seeing that submission, there would have been a growth in confidence across the sector in terms of actually submitting the outputs that are really truly expressing the nature of the research in that field. Should a field be fully expressed by just a small number of types of outputs, then that's what the panels will see. Then they will treat all of that fairly and equally. Should that be a broader range, then that's what the panel is going to see. I don't think there's a particular numerical expectation. There are no quotas of different types of outputs or anything like that. It really is about looking inside each field and feeling comfortable that the risk threshold has been lowered if you do decide to submit outputs that express all of the different practices in that field.
Yeah, and it's not really talking about appetite. I guess I did just want to add to what Alice said, which basically covers everything, really. But there's also, the panel's working really hard to think about taking the really, really excellent, insightful work that RDAP is doing and making sure it is clear in their disciplinary language to make sure that the panel criteria and working methods are taking that kind of the one ref RDAP guidance and making sure that it speaks to all of their communities so that they feel empowered and it is de-risked and that perception of risk is removed. But as Alice says, there is no quota. We're not expecting you to see numbered shifts in the types of outputs. Just that people understand that the guidance is for them. It's not for just other disciplines rather than their space.
Thank you very much. I wonder if there are any questions in the room? Here, please.
Hi, I'm Jane from UAL. Simon, you had a slide on the SPRE around the institutional level statements, and you said that they were going to be assessed by an institutional level panel. And I wondered if there was any thoughts around who that panel will comprise of and how you get that diversity of representation on that panel to reflect the diversity of institutions.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start on that one, yeah. So we are actively working on that exact question with our main and our sub-panels. And that is really the crux of the question we're asking is how do we get the right people to make sure that the outcomes are robust and that the panel has the confidence of the sector. So that is an ongoing process, and that will be ongoing over the criteria phase. So I think that it is a question we're really alive to, and we know that it needs to be carefully considered, and we need to take advice from PDAP and RDAP and our panels to make sure that we are building a panel that is appropriate for that role.
I mean, the only thing I would say is that it's following on from how PDAP and RDAP were put together. So Alice and I were talking just before, we had quite a number of different mechanisms to try to sift, so we were talking main panel coverage, coverage of all 4 countries, coverage of, different types of roles and career stages within my panel and within Alice's had a different sort of thing. So it's not an untested way of putting together a panel. I think that, while we're having the active conversations about what does that look like and how does it hold the confidence of the sector, it has been a sort of thing that we have done right throughout the process already. So there is a good mechanism for doing it, and so I think that there is an opportunity there to really do that. That being said, you also have to manage not getting a panel too big in order for it to be able to do its work. So there are a lot of backwards and forwards that will happen, I'm sure, but it is a very live question to make sure that it holds can hold the confidence of the sector.
One more here.
Thank you. Solino, University of Bristol. I would like to follow up on these questions around the ILS and particularly the relationship between the ILS and the ULS. And if they are not going to be assessed by the same panels, how is the link between them are going to be assessed? Because there is a very clear expectation that they need to talk to each other, which is very good in my opinion, but how is that going to be seen, assessed and considered? Can I ask a second one? On the previous question, you were talking about diversity of output that are welcome, but there is no mandate. To be inclusive, it's great to say these things which is different is welcome, but that's not enough to ensure that the person or the thing is feeling welcome. So, like, I think there's a question around criteria and evaluation, is like defining how these output are going to be evaluated. I think that's my answer to your third question. Or second question, the barriers. Like, people are not, from what we hear, not very comfortable about submitting diversity of output because they don't know how they're going to be assessed. So, yeah, if any comments on that will be very welcome. Thank you.
Which way? Do you want to start with the ILS?
Yeah, I can start with the ILS.
Yeah.
So again, this is a live question, and more will be published in autumn 2026. But yeah, this is the way that the IL and the UL statements operate together is very much the focus of the work that's being done at the moment. So I can't really give you any additional information about that now. Just to provide the reassurance that we know it's important and we are looking at it, and we have our best people on it with our panels. So yes, sorry, that's a bit of a non-answer, but just to reiterate that is something that we're very closely considering, and the panel criteria and working methods that will be published later in the year will have an awful lot of how the UL assessment will work and how the panels will deal with that. I should flag that the IL panel, so the institutional level panel, will have its own panel criteria and working methods, but they will need to be recruited so that they can write their working methods. So that will come slightly later so that they can fully operationalise and define how they're going to be operating. But it will be something that is actively on all of our radars over the next weeks and months.
So the only bit that I would add to that is it is deliberate and it is clear in what's already been published that the IL and the UL will need to talk to one another. So I think it was just a reassurance that is a very live understanding of how this will work. So as the methods are being discussed and put together, it is on the basis of what is already out there. It's not going to be another sort of shift away from what has already been put into the public domain. So that working between the IL and the UL will definitely be important. So if you're working on that, then it's not going to go anywhere to waste in that sort of context. And then I'll go over to Alan. Although the whole inclusion point and it sort of crosses over, you asked specifically about output, so I'll hand over to.
So thank you very much for this question. I don't think they're just generically welcome. They are encouraged because this is what research looks like, and REF submissions should look like the real world of research. There's a number of things that are happening which hopefully might suggest that there's more than just principles and values and a warm welcome at play here. So first of all, the panels themselves, including the advisory panels, but also the main panels, the sub-panels, they're composed of individuals who have a range of experience of different kinds of outputs, different types of formats, and different research practices as well. So we're building on that experience to begin with, and that is very much valued. The panels and sub-panels are receiving training that RDAP is involved in designing and delivering, and we had training from day one in terms of what research diversity and diversity of outputs means. And we've also been looking at kind of different areas of research and the kinds of outputs that arise from these areas in engagement with experienced colleagues in these. So that will also be the basis of the calibration exercise that we would want to run, and hopefully there will be some kind of simulations of assessments as well as part of that. The experience so far of myself and RDAP colleagues being on main panels and also attending the sub-panel meetings is that there is a lot of openness to these conversations across all of the main panels and sub-panels. I think it's a challenge that everybody welcomes because everybody's aware of how important it is to bring the REF very much in line with the realities of research out there. Another aspect of this is that we've been looking at evidence. There is research And there is there are secondary data as well that look at different types of outputs, at their prevalence in different fields, and also qualitative evidence about how different types of outputs may have been assessed or otherwise valued across fields of research. So we are gathering that evidence together. We're trying to do it as systematically as we can, and feeding that into the processes of the REF. I see that as an important element of what RDAP can contribute to this process. And finally, I think we've had the opportunity to access a lot of processes throughout the REF. So you were able to observe even the PC pilot, so from day one of our involvement in the REF. And we are being very reflective about that. So the kind of reports that we do and the interim feedback that we offer, they're always very direct, and when something seems to require kind of additional information, additional evidence, additional suggestions, we don't hesitate to do that in real time, rather than kind of wait until the end of a phase or anything like that. And we've had the opportunity to also review a lot of the documentation as well that's coming through. So hopefully that kind of reassures you that there are very concrete processes at play that enable that work to happen.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions online that might be a good time to pose to the panel. So a colleague is just noting about the HISA staff return date coming up, and obviously noting that decisions about UA allocation might need to come before UA descriptors are known. So they would like to know what type of mechanisms will be there if there needs to be made, any movements need to be made between UA allocations.
Brilliant. I'll take this, shall I?
Yeah.
Firstly, knew that one. Firstly, yes, we are really conscious that there is a misalignment between what is needed in terms of the HISA deadline and what is happening in terms of the timeline for the publication of the guidance. And we have been exploring that in quite a lot of detail, and we acknowledge that this is not an ideal order of things. There will be an amendments process. We've been working really closely with HISA to ensure that we can offer additional flexibility in relation to the 25-26 collection that should be going in October. We know that people may wish to use it. It might reflect the UOA descriptors, it might reflect their changing shape of their institution. That amendments process will be published over the next period of time ahead of the guidance coming out in the autumn. But we are really conscious that this is additional clarity that is needed as quickly as possible. And it is mentioned in the volume measure guidance that we are exploring this, and just so to reiterate, yes, we are exploring it. News is coming soon, I think is probably the fair thing to say there. But also, yes, we are conscious that the data has probably for the most part been collected, signed off, etc. by a lot of institutions, or will be over the coming weeks. And we appreciate that the timing isn't ideal. Sorry.
Thank you very much for that. Taking us back a little bit to the assessment and criteria, a colleague would like to know what are the current definitions of vitality and sustainability, and what are the plans to make those operational within the assessment?
I can take that. That's me again. Yep. So at the moment, the definitions are unchanged from REF 2021. So if you want a blast from the past, do feel free to read the guidance on submissions and panel criteria and working methods from the previous exercise. The updated information will be published in autumn 2026, and all the detail answering that question will be in there. So watch this space.
Okay, and we'll take one more from the online colleagues. So going back to the sector strain at the moment, with lots of universities going through quite severe change. This will impact both the research culture, but also some of the research colleagues, particularly ECR or minoritized groups or females. So what are your thoughts about how REF will be impacted, and will there be any kind of response to this by REF itself?
Shall I start?
Yeah, why not? I'll let you go first. And
Okay.
then
There have been a lot of conversations across many different groups over the nearly 2 years that Alice and I have been in post, and even in that time, I think what's really important is that we can get into a habit of our own institution, then assuming that those impacts on people are similar in other institutions. What we are definitely finding is that those changes and the impacts on people, career stages are incredibly varied across the sector. So what we're not seeing at the moment is a sort of uniform clamour for something in particular. So what's really important, as Alice has said about the balance between burden and sort of responsibility and mindfulness around this, is that I think we are very clear in the development of both the IL and the UL that this is about making sure that people can narrate what this looks like for them to the panel that is assessing that is assessing them. It is incredibly varied. It's also varied by nation and it's varied by discipline, main panel area. It's not only type of institution. This is across the board an incredibly moving landscape. I think the other thing to say is that we expect it to be a different landscape in 29 than it is today, and therefore it's really important that we do that. So from my perspective, what's been really impressive in the way that the REF and the REF steering group and all of those has been addressing it is to keep it a very live issue throughout the process, to keep it a live discussion, to make sure that whenever we're talking to people, whether it's through a sort of smaller group of mission group discussion, or whether it's the REF steering group, or whether it's between the panels and panel members, and it is to make sure that that is addressed continually and talked about. So, well, is there any impact of this that we should be thinking about in developing this? So keeping it as a live conversation, I think going to the point about how can you be inclusive, that part of that is about being conscious of these impacts continually and making sure that you have these conversations continually. And I have been, certainly from my role, which as Alice can be, is slightly, we're in the process, but we are advisory as well. It's been a very impressive thing to see that the steering group pays really close attention, as well as the main panels, as well as the sub-panels. The PCE pilot had exactly the same conversation, so everything that I'm observing is it's a very live conversation. From my perspective, and from the discussions that we have at PDAP, I'm not sure there is a solution to this. What this is about is making sure that people feel comfortable to say, that these are the things that they're, and that's that accepting bit that RDAP and PDAP are trying to engender within this, to say, actually, this isn't just about saying everything's great. This is about saying, how did we manage through difficult circumstances? That is part of vitality. That is part of sustainability. Even when you read the 21 definitions, it's in there. So it's about saying, actually, we've done really well at managing the sustainability of our research communities through difficult circumstances or through these changes, and making sure that the panels are open to rewarding successful sustainability that's managed in that way for people, careers, roles, career stages. Final bit of the question, which is it's very uneven. It's uneven across demographics as well. So there are big demographic changes to how we are seeing the research community across the UK. So we're mindful to that and continue to monitor and advise on that as we go forward.
Did you want to add anything on this one, Alice?
No, just I should have mentioned the fact that the guidance already also includes, if you remember, for outputs, it includes an exception in terms of eligibility of outputs. And the purpose of that exception was to support, to mitigate kind of unintended consequences in a sector that is facing a lot of challenges in terms of research methods and format types that typically take longer to produce, maybe being disinvested by institutions and excluded from submissions and so on. So you will be hopefully familiar with those exceptions, and that's one of the mechanisms in the REF through which some of that mindfulness of the challenges translates into concrete guidance.
Okay, thank you very much. We are getting about time, so I'll see if there is one more question in the room. Yes, here at the front, please.
Hi, I've just finished doing a big round of training for output reviewers, and as much as I show like Alice's chaos slides of how diversity is in the guidance throughout, and I quote Hugh McKenna at the last ARMA session in Manchester talking about how research diversity is encouraged, I get a response of, oh, well, that's what the guidance has to say, and yeah, you say that, you know, publication venue isn't valued, but the panel members are academics too, and they have the same sort of biases as we do, so it will be. And so I'm just constantly getting sort of this pushback, and I wondered whether RDAP and PDAP had plans to communicate directly to academic audiences, because unfortunately, like everyone in this room will know, sometimes they just don't listen when it comes from a research manager. So, you know, do you have any plans to communicate with that academic audience and maybe even involve the panel chairs in that, because sometimes it helps from a disciplinary perspective?
I mean, it could be. This could be a question for Sylvia, but I won't put on Helen. I think as Rebecca laid out, there is a phasing to this, and obviously once we get into the criteria, I think there's a really important phase about what the panels do, both the sub-panels, the main panels, and the advisory panels during the submission creation phase. That's going to be vitally important to getting some of these aspirations met, because it's not just whatever the guidance says. It is very much hearing community-wise what we know, what we're doing about that, and, you know, Alice is, you know, putting and RDAP in general and PDAP in general are putting together quite a lot of work with the panels that has already started about making sure that these diversities are valued, and we have taken the learnings from the PCE pilot to see what some of those biases were in order to try to address them in the main. So the process is working as intended, and I think that communication phase during that, and I know the reason I said Sylvia is Sylvia's the communications director, and I think she's been putting together a really big engagement plan for the submission period, and I think that's going to be really important. We have also been doing Meet the Community events, and we've been saying many of these things, but I think it's going to be the submission phase where it has the biggest impact. Reasonable?
Yeah, that's good. I'll probably that as well. So we've done Meet the Community event in all of the devolved administrations, and we've done a number of interactions already. Now we are in the criteria setting phase. As soon as this phase ends, there will be more engagement events. There's already a plan, actually, of engagement activities. So I know that the learned societies are also thinking about research diversity and commissioning their own work and kind of really making the discussion lively, and that's going to help as well. In concrete terms, RDAP are planning to produce a number of public communications and in the shape of blogs to begin with, and pieces on the REF website, sharing these messages as broadly as possible. So there is a plan, and suggestions, of course, will be very much welcome.
Can I just add one thing on, not just this, I think that there are other communication channels that have been put in place through things like learned societies, places like this, that are going to be really, really important to getting that message through.
Unfortunately, we are kind of short on time, so this is a good time to stop. And then can I ask our colleague Paul to please move the slide to the next slide? It's come. So there is a code for you to follow, and we would be grateful if you can access the survey and give us your feedback. The survey will be open all of the rest of the day until 5 o'clock. This would be invaluable for all of the advisory panels to get the views of the sector on these questions. So I see people taking photos and getting the QR code, so thank you very much. I'm going to say thank you to our panelists, Alice, Rebecca, and Simon. And thank you both to the audience in the room and online for a great session. Thank you very much.